Hi guys, my name is Emma Torsolo, and I decided for my hot topic that I was going to talk about mental illness in YA literature. And the reason I was thinking about this is because a couple of weeks ago, when we were discussing classic literature, the discussion on Catcher in the Rye, we were talking about whether people liked Holden Caulfield or not, and whether they realized that he was suffering from depression. And one thing that a few people said was that they hadn't realized that he was depressed, or that students often tended not to see that Holden Caulfield was actually pretty depressed and suffering from pretty high level anxiety in this. So I was curious whether how mental illness in general is represented in the YA literature of today, and if there's been any change, and if people are more able to see themselves and find more, maybe what they think of as more realistic depictions of depression in teenage years. Although I think that the depiction of Holden Caulfield is actually pretty realistic in terms of what a teen goes through in terms of anxiety and depression. Anyway, one of the things I discovered is that there is actually a huge, fairly recent body of work in terms of depiction of various different mental illnesses in YA fiction, everything from eating disorders to cutting to schizophrenia to anxiety, OCD. Pretty much you could name a mental illness and there's an entire genre of fiction about it, which makes sense because mental illness amongst teens sadly is on the rise. And I think by some estimates that I saw, about 20% of adolescents at any given time are suffering from some kind of mental illness, and about 50% of all lifetime mental illnesses tend to start by about age 14, and about three-quarters of all lifetime mental illnesses are usually started by age 24. So in other words, it's a pretty serious national health problem, and only recently has the literature for this population really begun to address these issues in a way that's not judgmental and accurate and researched and empathetic, and just basically giving these people a voice. There was a quote here I wanted to read from the Erin Moulton in the School Library Journal. She says, "Fiction has a special magic to it, the ability to weave a world outside reality, to simulate experiences and outcomes. For someone who feels alone, a friend awaits within the pages, someone who says, 'Yes, I've been there, have gone through that. I'm suffering along with you.'" Now, obviously, reading novels about mental illness, it's not a replacement for professional therapy or for medication or for whatever else a teenager might need, but it could certainly complement that, both for the person who is suffering from the mental illness, but also for peers, family members. Just it's sort of a way it increases empathy, it increases awareness, it increases sensitivity, especially when the books are well researched, when the voice feels real, when the situations feel real. And a lot of older books that feature mental illness, there's stereotypes, and there's still kind of a stigma around it. You look at One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, and the word crazy in that book, it meant someone who was subversive or creative or sort of an outsider. And in various other older books, you see mental illness, it's a sin, or it's something that you can get over just by thinking positively, or it's a character flaw, it's a weakness, it's something that you can get over by making positive lifestyle changes, that sort of thing. So, the books of today, you see more realistic depictions of mental illness. You see teenagers dealing with psychiatrist visits or side effects of medication, or that sort of thing. And these books they can be a benefit for librarians as well. They can help increase librarians' awareness of teen issues and sensitivity, and it can help them, just even knowing that this genre of books is out there can help them with collection development, and but also just in terms of being aware of who their visitors are. And I saw in one article I was reading that a library had changed the physical setup of the library, sort of having read a lot about teenagers who might be suffering from autism or incredibly anxious, and they created a space within the library which was lower stimulation and a quieter space for teens who might need a space to catch their breath. And these books can also be used as teaching aids, obviously, in terms of increasing awareness and empathy amongst, given the high percentage of teenagers who suffer from a mental illness, they can be used to increase empathy and awareness and sensitivity amongst classmates of people. I mean, not by pointing out and saying, hey, Johnny's got a mental illness, let's learn about it, but in a much more general, anonymous way. And I'm not sure, I think obviously having the books on the shelf is great, but that's not necessarily on its own always enough. I was looking at a study which was related on a slightly different topic, but there was a dissertation I was skimming that was about testing whether books on disability, whether if teens read them, if it changed their opinion about fellow students with disabilities. And for the most part, just reading the books, it didn't significantly impact their way that they thought of their peers. The person who wrote the dissertation suggested that maybe guided reading and sort of a more focused approach using these novels would be a better way. And, you might say the same about novels that feature mental illness as well. And so I found in the blog post that I uploaded, I linked to a lesson plan that I thought was pretty interesting. That was a collaboration between a school librarian and a health teacher in 10th grade. And they used some novels, some current novels in YA fiction featuring mental illness as a way to teach a unit on awareness of different kinds of mental illness, which I thought was really interesting. And the last point that I read about on this topic, which I thought was pretty interesting, is that there are so many obviously teachable moments in novels like this. And so, there is a tendency for some people to think, well, are these not, is that all they are? And there was this genre in the 70s of YA literature, they called them problem novels. And these were just, pretty, they weren't very complex books, and they were these sort of kind of like an after-school special or a PSA, except in the form of a YA novel. And it was just, the teen had a problem, and then the adults helped them figure it out, and everything was okay. So I think in terms of selecting books to read with teens or books to have in your collection, obviously you want to make sure that the book's well researched and not judgmental and it's accurate, but most of all, you want to make sure that the book has an authentic voice and it doesn't read like a after-school special or a PSA, because obviously the real stories and the authentic voices, that's what matters more than anything. Anyway, I included some links to the articles I read, and some of them have a lot of great recommendations of places to start in terms of great novels. So I hope you guys will check them out. Thanks.